Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session of American Literature Workshop. I'm so glad that you're here. I cannot see you, but I know that you're there. The official name of this workshop is Praxis Literature, Content and Analysis Workshop. You're going to see that name in all the presentations, but we're not going to refer to it as that way, in that way. We're going to divide it into chapters, as I mentioned before. So in last class, we started chapter number 1 with lesson 1. Today, we're going to conclude this chapter with lesson number 2. All the terms that you learned last class and that you're going to learn this class are intertwined, so they are very important to keep in mind. In last class, I presented to you the major literary forms. As I mentioned that there are 4: nonfiction prose, fiction prose, poetry, and drama. But we only had the chance to learn about one, that was fiction prose. Why was that? Well, that was the longest one in terms of vocabulary and definitions. So that's why that's the dosage, right? You only learn about that one, which means that today we're going to learn about the other 3. We're going to learn about the nonfiction form, poetry, poetic forms, and drama. Now, let's start with the first one, nonfiction as literary form. You see number 4 there because it's the continuation of what we learned last class. In this type, we have biographies, essays, and journalism. But what are nonfiction books? Well, these are documents written as an attempt of the author to tell the truth. We cannot say that what they wrote is for sure the only truth because they write according to their perspectives. Maybe in a whole different, the same situation can be expressed in a different way from another point of view. But that's what they try to do. They intend to tell the truth through facts or verifiable information. In this type of documents, we have biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. Biographies are documents that talk about someone's life. In this case, the person, like the main character of the book, is someone else. So the writer is one person and the main character of the book is another one. Usually, people that write biographies are close friends to those people or are people that follow that person's life. Usually, we have a lot of biographies from presidents or very influential people, right? Now, autobiographies, this is a very self-explanatory term, but autobiographies can be confused with biographies. Autobiographies are, of course, a book about someone's life, but in here, the person that is writing the book is the main character as well. That means that if you want to write about your life, you are going to make an autobiography. If your closest friend wants to write about a book about you, that would be a biography. These two types, biography and autobiography, explain the life of a person from the moment they were born or the childhood memories, from the teenage years until you get to the last years of that person's life. Now, memoirs are also in this category, but they can be a bit different. Memoirs are, well, talk about someone's life, but not completely. Memoirs intend to portray a specific phase or event in that person's life. Usually that refers to problems or difficulties that that person had to endure to get where they are and how they overcome those problems. In memoirs, we have a lot of books about, the cancer illness and how people dealt with that type of illness and how the process was, because they try to make other people know how it is to live in a situation like that. Now you can see there that there's an image about Benjamin Franklin. The Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. He wrote the book himself, and this is one of the most important books in the U.S. society, or for the U.S. society, because it's not only about Benjamin Franklin's life, it's also a very important historical document because he portrayed there all his ideals or beliefs in politics, and is his major literary work. He, as you know, was a very influential person. His legacy is still present in the American society and American politics. Now, this book is a major source for exploring Franklin's ideas on wealth because he wrote books about how to become wealthy, but he also mentioned it in here. And virtue. Why? Because as Mr. Chavarria explained some classes ago, he talked about his mistakes the mistakes that he made when he was younger, the virtues that he was trying to adopt into his lifestyle, like humility, to live a simple life, to not spend a lot of money on unnecessary things. And those were the matters that he wrote about. But he also gave some advices in there. For example, one advice that he said is that image that you see there. That's actually a quote. And he said, "We are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid." That's one thing that he said. And now, he also talked about his active civic participation. Why is that? Well, remember, he was one of the men that just made 13 colonies into a country, right? He was one of one of those influential persons that, well, started the whole movement in the US. So this is a very important book. Let's remember that. Now, we're going to talk about the essays and journalism because they also are included in this category. I know that you have written a lot, actually, from this subject. You wrote one. But let's remember, essays are works that introduce an author's opinion. Still, we're talking about facts, but we are now focusing in that person's opinion, that person's perspective of a matter, of a specific situation. Let's remember that there are different types of essay. There are essays that try to be persuasive and try to convince the reader to think the same way that the person that wrote the essay thinks. And we have journalism. In here we can find journalistic articles like writings specifically for newspapers, magazines, or online sources. And in online sources we refer to everything from blogs and news channels, videos, informative videos, and things like that. But when we refer to journalism, we need to be very careful. Why? Why do we need to be very careful? Sometimes we can read something and that might not be true. So it's very important for us to read or to be sure that what we are reading, that information is true or is verifiable. And how can we verify if that information is true? Well, we can check the sources, we can check the citations from different books or different authors. And I want to emphasize this because with the pandemic situation, there were, I don't know if you remember that, but there were so many fake news that said that if you do this, you're not going to get the disease. If you do that, you're going to get it. I don't know if you read that news in some American newspapers that some people in the US were drinking the things that we use to like to clean the floor or to disinfect it. They were drinking that because they were trying to clean their cells from the inside, and that didn't help. The only thing that did was that they had to go to the hospital to get like something like to because they were poisoned. They poisoned themselves, so they needed medical assistance. So that's why you need to be very careful with what you read, because if you're not, you might get in those type of shameful situations. So let's remember, non-fictional books or stories try to talk about facts and the reality, but sometimes from their perspective, as long as they're trying to be faithful to the truth. Now let's talk about poetry. Poetry as literary form. Poetry can mean something to you and mean something to me. Usually we think that poetry is something boring or cheesy. So let's try to do those type of ideas aside, leave them aside, just try to think that this is the first time that you're learning what poetry is. Maybe that in that way you can see it from a different perspective and not get bored or confused about it. There are many definitions about poetry, but this is the one I chose. You can absolutely have a different definition about this. Poetry is a form of literature that adds meaning in the qualities of the words, such as their sounds. What does that mean? That's very fancy talk. Poems usually have this characteristic that I find very interesting, because what you read is not necessarily what they meant. And with that, we are going to different fields. Poetry or poets use this type of thing called symbolism. They create symbols for some specific words or things that they are trying to say, but in a hidden way. They want you to read once or twice what they wrote in order for you to fully have or capture what they were trying to say. So in here, when we read poems, maybe one time is not going to be enough. Maybe you will have to read 4 times the same poem to really understand the context and what they were trying to convey. Why? Well, what you read is from the semantics perspective, right? But maybe they are not trying to make you, they're not referring to that semantic definition. Depending on the context, they might be talking in a pragmatic way. So you need to take into consideration pragmatics to understand sometimes poems. Not all of them are like that. It's not like you're going to decipher a secret message, but yes, you really need to analyze and dedicate some time to this type of literary form. Now, how can you identify poems? Well, you can easily identify them because they are written in a different way. The lines of these poems are different. They are shorter, they are called verses or lines. Poetry also has this, it's different from the literary form that we were talking before. The nonfiction one talks about facts, about reality, while poetry is going to focus a bit more in feelings and emotions. So here we're not going to maybe talk about logical things, or we're not going to discuss about that. We're usually poets try to make you feel what they felt when they wrote it. So if they write about loneliness, they will use all the devices that they can to make you feel lonely while you read it, to make you feel what they were feeling. It's not about factual stuff. It's more about emotional things. Now let's talk about some formal features of poetry. There are others, but we're going to try to see these ones only. We have meter, not the measure, like not the one that we use to measure. This is a different concept. We have rhyme schemes, we have stanzas, and poetic forms. Yeah, you can also have you also have their feet, but that's not the body part. That's a specific function of poetry, or to create poetry. So first of all, let's remember some terms that we learned, if I'm not mistaken, last semester. We have stanza, meter, rhythm, and rhyme. So stanzas are lines grouped together like a paragraph. We're going to do that comparison very often with paragraphs and stanzas. They are kind of the same. They make the same function. They have the same function, but they are called in a different way because they don't belong to the same type of form. So in poems, we're going to talk about that. We're going to refer to that as stanza, and in prose, we're going to call it paragraph. We have rhythm and rhyme. I don't know if you remember, but last class I said that there is a musical aspect of poems, and that musical aspect comes from rhythm and rhyme. Rhythm is the beat of the poem, and rhyme are the words that sound the same or usually sound similar, but they are often found at the end of lines. We're going to make the difference between those terms in a second. Now, meter refers to a pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables. This one might be a bit more complicated than the other ones, so let's start with that one. Meter and rhyme scheme. What is that? What is meter? What is rhyme scheme? So meter, in other words, is about the structure, but not the structure of, oh yeah, this has 4 words, or it has 10 words each line. No, it's not about that. It's the structure of the sounds. How come? Well, meter is how words are emphasized to produce a rhythm. Here, we are going to talk about a suprasegmental feature that is, yes, stress. Stress is what makes meter a function or a very important feature in poetry, because poets have to write very carefully in order to maintain a specific meter. And when we talk about stress, we are talking, well, I'm going to explain this example. Maybe that in that way it's going to be easier. As you can see in the presentation, there are 2 words in there. They are written the same. Of course, they are from the homonyms family. They have different meanings, and they are pronounced differently. Now, why is that important? In poetry, it is very important. For example, the first one is object. That means a thing. An object is a thing. Now, that is a noun. But what happens with the second one? Object. Object. Now, we are talking about to protest. That is not a noun. That is a verb, an action. So object and object are a clear difference of how the stress of syllables can change a word or the structure of something. Now, you saw in the previous presentation feet. So feet is the one in charge of differentiating those patterns of sounds. For example, if the first syllable is stressed in all the lines of these stanzas, that is one type of feet, and it has its a specific name. If the second syllable of all the words in the poem have their stress in the second syllable, that is another type of feet. So feet refers to that pattern in a more specific way, while meter refers in a general way. Now we have rhyme scheme. I hope that's clear. If it's not, remember you can write me anytime for further explanation. Now we have rhyme scheme. A rhyme scheme is also related with sounds, but this one is a pattern of sounds that comes at the end of each verse or line in poetry. So here we're going to focus more in the last word of the poem. And here there is an example. The rhyme schemes are usually labeled with alphabetic letters. And you have the example there. The monster chef, that's only one stanza. The monster chef cooked up a meal of spotted toad and speckled eel. He threw some socks into a pot and boiled buttons piping hot. Okay, now that you read that with me, let's look at the last words of each line. We have meal and eel. They are both represented with letter A because they have a very similar sound. Eel, meal. And then we have pot and hot, labeled with the letter B because they also have similar sound. Hot, hot. So that's what rhyme scheme is. That's one rhyme scheme is very useful when you're trying to analyze a poem. Now let's talk about stanzas. Stanzas are a series of lines grouped together in a poem. They are the equivalent of a paragraph in an essay, but because we're not talking about prose, we're going to refer, when we are talking about poetry, we're going to refer to it as stanza. Stanza, a group of lines. Depending on how many lines are part of the stanza, that's how we're going to differentiate them. For example, if you have one stanza with 2 lines, that is called a couplet. But if you have one stanza with 9 verses, you have an stanzarian stanza. That's only for you to know. Maybe you're not going to specifically learn, you won't have to learn what's a sestet and things like that, but it's going to be important when we get to another movement in the next unit of the subject. Now here I have a poem that I like a lot. It's called The Chaos by Gerard Nost. This is the translated version. The poem is not originally in English, but it refers to English because it tries to portray how difficult it can be to learn English to pronounce correctly English because of so many exceptions in pronunciation. So here you have the first 4 stanzas. So the stanza number 1 says, and please read it with me or read it by yourself. Dearest creature in creation, studying English pronunciation. I will teach you in my verse, sounds like corpse, core, horse, and wars. I will keep you Susie busy, make your head with heat grow dizzy. Tear and eye, your dress you'll tear. Queer, fair seer, hear my prayer. Now we have stanza 3 and 4. Pray console your loving poet, make my coat look new, dear, sew it. Just compare hard here and heard, dies and diet, lord and word, sword and sword, retain and written. Mind the latter how it's written. Made has not the sound of paid, say, said, pay, paid, laid, but played. Now this is the last stanza because it has a lot, but the last stanza says, don't you think so, reader, rather, saying lather, bather, father? Finally, which rhymes with enough? Though, through, bow, cough, hoe, soft, though. Oh, sorry, tough. Hiccup has the sound of sup. My advice is, give it up. So that's not my advice. That's only the poem. And if you're interested, I will try to leave you the link to read it completely. But yeah, as you can see there, it tries to show the different pronunciation of some words, even though they're written the same. But that's how English is. For example, here we have say and said. Say is the infinitive form of the verb, and then we have said, which is the past, simple past form of it. Now, let's talk about the poetic forms. That was only the example of a poem. Let's talk about poetic forms. Now, in here, we're not going to talk about the general terms, but we're going to talk about the typification of poems. So we have 2 types. We have lyric poetry and we have narrative poetry. In lyric poetry, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the session, here we have poems with one speaker who expresses strong thoughts or feelings, right? Emotions. Here we're talking about emotions. Some examples of this type of poetry are sonnets, which are 14 line stanzas, poems. We have elegies, that if you don't remember, elegies are the poems that talk about sadness, loneliness, mourning, things like that. And we have odes that are very joyful poems. So lyric poetry is about feelings, or trying to write about feelings. And then we have narrative poetry. Here, we are not talking about feelings, but we are trying to tell a story. These are poems that tell stories and resembles a lot the plot of a story, like in a prose story. It has a plot, characters, and settings in a specific setting. So this is a version of a story, but in narrative, in a poem. So here we can have examples as ballads, which are a very musical piece of writing, and epics that, of course, tells the story about a, a hero who saved his, I don't know, his hometown because of his specific, his greatness or his strength and things like that. So they just say a story, they tell a story, but using all the poetry features or formal features. So lyric poetry, let's remember, feelings. Narrative poems, as the name says, narrates stories. Now that we have talked about two types. We have talked about poems, and we have talked about nonfiction books, nonfiction pieces of writing. We're going to talk about the elements of drama. Now, drama is not a topic that you're going to study very often because, as you can imagine, is not as popular as the other ones. You have to be very, like, you have to acquire you have to acquire that feeling or that attraction for dramas, but not like drama of problems and things like that, but drama as the literary form. But let's define what drama is. Drama is a piece of writing presented almost exclusively through dialogue. Why is that almost underlined? Because, of course, it is not always. You are not going to only write through dialogue. You can use other type of resources that we're going to learn in a minute. Drama is meant to be performed in front of an audience. So this is exclusively to be performed in a theater or with people looking, like watching the scenes or the scenes of this drama play. That's how we call it, drama play. Here we're not going to talk about books anymore. We're going to talk about more of performance and things like that. But what is the difference between drama and prose? We have seen that before, and sorry for that. I don't know why every time that you convert the presentation, it just moves the letters and just disorganize everything. But that's what it says. What is the difference between drama and prose? First of all, prose uses paragraphs. In drama, you don't use paragraphs, you use dialogue. Because here, you don't write to people read it. You write it for some people, read it and perform it. Also, prose, it's divided in chapters. Chapter 1, chapter 2, just like our workshop, but in drama, you don't have chapters. You have acts. Act 1, Act 2. Even some movies have this type of division. I don't know if there's one movie from Quentin Tarantino that it's divided in acts. And you also don't have a story. You don't call it a book. You don't call it a novella or novels. You call it script. They write a script where they define the personality of a character, or they write the details of how a setting or a scene is going to be presented to the audience. Now, drama. how does it differ with the other type of literary forms? Well, actually, it doesn't differ a lot in this particular aspect because they have a plot just like a normal story, just like a prose story. You have an opening where you read, where you learn about the characters. You have an incident um, that made you go to a conflict. Then you have the rising action. You have the climax where everything is lost, like you don't have any hope that things are going to go back to normal. It seems like nothing is going to be fixed. But when you get to the falling action, you can see how things start um, to be different. How some actions can make the difference in what's going to happen next. Because when we get to the falling action, we are almost finishing the drama play until you get to the resolution. In the resolution, you know what happened with each character or how they how the actions they made, like what are the consequences of those actions. So that's how a drama plot is presented. That's what you're going to see, even if you that's what you're going to watch if you go to the theater and you are interested in a drama play. It doesn't differ a lot from a prose story. You have the same things in a short story or sometimes in a fable. Now, there are some characteristics of drama that you are not going to find in the other literary forms. For example, you have a monologue, a soliloquy, and a side. A monologue refers to a person, saying like there's one character in the stage and no one else, and that character is just talking and expressing something. Now, in the second one, we have the same, but it's different. How is it different? Well, you are going to let me know that. And then we have an aside. An aside is usually when a character is by him or herself in the stage, but is given information about what's going to happen. It's like when a character just tells you a secret, something that no one else knows. You can find that, for example, in the drama of Mary Poppins, when one of the characters just get like gets it's alone in the stage and starts to say some things that you would have not known if that person hasn't expressed it in there. So those are some characteristics of drama that you're not going to find in prose or non-fictional types of writing. Now here, I just want to show you some examples of drama plays. We have this one, The Crucible. The Crucible is a 1953 play by the American playwright. Oh, here we don't call them authors or writers, we call them playwright, and Arthur Miller. It is a dramatized and partially fictionalized story of the Salem witch trials that you already know a lot about it, that took place in the Massachusetts Bay Colony during 1692 and 93. So this person, Arthur Miller, he took as a basis the story of the Salem witch trials, but he didn't do that just because he wanted to talk about the Salem witch trials. He did it because he tried to make an analogy with this event in history with with what was happening at that moment. He made a comparison with the communists and how they were being treated in the society. If you're interested, you can go and watch in YouTube some videos. There are some videos that it's not the whole play, but you can at least know a bit more about it. And we have another one. We have Hamilton. This is a more contemporary drama play, but it's very well known because of the way that they transmit a message. Hamilton is a character from the U.S. history. He was very important. He was a very important person, but is now this play explains Hamilton's life, Hamilton's death and all that, but in a very peculiar way, because this is a musical. So you're going to listen to a lot of songs. This one, if you're interested, I don't know if you can watch it on YouTube, but there are some platforms where you can watch it, and it's pretty cool. So, to conclude this session and to conclude chapter number 1, now that we are at the end of this session, you should, or you can now, identify the formal qualities of poetry and the ways that it differs from prose. You can make a comparison between biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, essays, and journalism or journalistic articles. But you can also name how playwrights use dramatic elements to tell a story on the stage. Now you have a homework. You're going to let me know. There's one word in drama that you need to look for, and I know that you're not going to know that if you don't watch the video until the end. Now, you also have, and you will always have, some quizzes or some activities related with this video. Of course, you're going to have 5 other questions that you're going to answer about this session. The first question is, what are, if poems or documents written as an attempt of the author to tell the truth? You're going to mark there if it's true or if it's false. You will also have other type of questions in there that I'm not going to show right now, but you can look for it. I don't know when exactly or how long is it going to take after you have watched the video to answer to these quizzes, but you please be checking out the platform so you can answer these questions. There are 5, so don't worry. Everything is about what we learned in the class today. And of course, in the presentation, you're going to find the resources. You can find there the visual aids or the links for the visual aids that I made, that I used. Or if you're interested in some specific thing or situation that I mentioned in the presentation, you can also look in there. For example, if you're interested in one of the drama plays, you can just look, and maybe you're going to find the answer there. Now, thank you so much for attending this second class. Let me know what you think, please. I wanna know what you think about the class. And yeah, hopefully we're going to see each other next week or in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you learned something today. And that would be it for today. Thank you. Now, this is the conclusion for chapter 1. Have a great day and take care, guys.